Mr. President, sir, it is a very great pleasure to be here and to be confronted with such a delightful and conspicuous contradiction from the bench opposite. We had two speeches. We had a visual illustration. We had a stone axe. It was literally, materially, fundamentally stated, individuals do not matter. And then my dear colleague, Sir Richard, came with a very sensible compromise in which he said, yes, individuals do matter, but they're shaped by circumstance. Now, dear me, what a revelation. What astonishingly original thinking. I labor here under a process of revelation. I am, in about my 60th year of writing history. And, I'd never thought these thoughts before at all. Never for a moment had it crossed my mind. Now, fortunately, I'll be more formal. The third proposer of the motion cited Carlyle, who is very easy to parody. Can we just think for a moment, though, what Carlyle was? He was a figure who believed in greatness in an age that produced greatness. The third speaker has spoken quite frankly in saying we're in a petty age of the common man that dare not confront greatness and hesitates even to use the word. Now that seems to me to be a pathetic failure. It also is one of the reasons that democracy itself is not working. If democracy loses that, my colleague, Mr. Gimson, that sense of the possibility of a Churchill, that sense of the possibility of a Lincoln, by language. This is more than the diminution of the word propaganda. This is turning language. What this place is about, what it is founded on, is two things: the notion of parliamentary debate and the notion of rhetoric, of persuasive speech. All human thought is in human heads. People support it because people use the language that converts them, that makes them want to support it, that makes them want to fight, that makes them want to march, that makes them want to support. That matters, and only an individual can do it, quite simply. But again, let's just go back more closely to the Carlyle statement. He says biography. Now, he, I think, had a very particular notion of biography, but as somebody who's written quite a few of them, the biographer begins precisely with what the proposer of the motion was talking about. You begin with the idea of tradition. You begin with the specificity of circumstance. You begin with the structure of family, all of these things. The individual isn't, born like Venus out of the head of Zeus. You are a creation of circumstance. This is precisely, of course, precisely what the anybody who's ever thought about this seriously, particularly a conservative, that we've been getting a rather large amount of leftism. The conservative understands that the individual is fundamentally, as Burke said, a product of the past, of tradition. What matters is what you do with it. Let us take somebody that I've studied quite a lot. Let's take the example of Henry VIII. And a man who is either great or as destructive in many ways as Hitler. He's frequently referred to as the English Stalin. Let's look at how this actually plays out in his case. The two key things, I think, that underlie Henry's reign, if we simply ignore the structures of monarchy, one of them is the Reformation itself. The other is the use of the printing press, exactly the kind of thing that the proposers of the motion were talking about. Let's look what happened. Henry begins his reign the most conventional of Catholics. He had a sort of little spark in his mind that had been planted by studying Erasmus, so he knows the new Latin, which will eventually make him rather sensitive to the new approaches to theology, which were also grounded in what were called the back to the sources, the ad fontes movement that's pioneered by Erasmus and then developed in a very different way by Luther. But what is striking is Henry hates Luther. Henry hated Luther to the point at which he writes a book against him. The first time, apart from King Alfred, that the king had actually done that. He then launches a savage persecution of Luther, which uses figures like Sir Thomas More, with More, I'm afraid, figuring as a particularly brutal minister of police. And then you know what happens? He meets a woman. He meets Anne Boleyn. We can date it to, this again is what worries me so much about what I've been hearing, the complete inability to understand that history depends on the moment, on circumstance. You were talking about Hitler. You were not in any way diminishing the importance of Hitler. You were simply pointing out what Henry does. He seizes a moment, and the world literally stands on his head. He pledges on the 1st of January, 1527, and you can date it literally from one word in a letter. On the 1st of January, 1527, he pledges to marry Anne Boleyn. And at that point, everything changes. His complete stance on religion shifts and reverses. There would have been no reason for an English Reformation if Henry VIII had not fallen in love with Anne Boleyn. This vast change, you were talking about cathedrals, you were talking about monasteries. The vast sweeping away of 600 monasteries would not have happened. We would have had vastly more of those structures standing. It is one man at one moment with one woman. It is the astonishing sense of particularity, of specificity, of circumstance. We have another example at the moment, which of course we should all be looking at. It is when the clown becomes a great man. It's called Zelensky. Zelensky was a clown. Zelensky was a mere comedian. What happens is he is offered circumstance. He is offered the unique circumstance of the birth of a nation. What we are witnessing in the Ukraine is everything that my opponents disapprove of. We're witnessing a genuine sense of national creation, a genuine sense of greatness, a sense of a nation born exactly as America was reborn under Lincoln, born in blood and conflict and horror. That is what we are talking about. Mr. President, sir, I got interested in history, and this relates to the little jibe which the proposer threw against me. I got interested in history as a boy of very humble background like Richard, and I was given a book because I had many problems with ill health when I was a child, and I was receiving physiotherapy from an extraordinary woman who took rather a shine to me. And she gave me a book called 100 Great Lives. And she said, you'll be one of them. Now, I'm not. And I'm a sort of proximea cessit, almost getting there. But why I survived, what people tried to do to me, was because I had that self-belief, because I dared to resist the great forces that you people have worshipped so slavishly. I do not believe in slavery. I do not believe that you simply give way. I believe, like Zelensky, like Churchill, like Henry, that you fight and that matters.